Hey there, everybody. How's it going today? Hope you all are doing well. So I hope you've been enjoying the current Dominar United standard season and season for limited. But it's hard to believe that Brothers War is already here. The full set has been revealed, and it's time again to do another set review. So figured we would jump into it and go through all the cards for the Brothers War main set. But before I get started, just want to do a quick overview of the rating system I use. It's a little different than what some other streamers do, since I do both limited and constructed. But I'll go over it real quick before we get going. So since I do limited and constructed, the ratings that I give for the cards will vary depending on the format. And I use 4 tiers. Basically, the range from low to high. For example, the lowest ratings I do is low for limited or constructed. These are cards that you might put in your deck if you have an absence of any playables, and more like fillers, or maybe cards that have a narrow focus that might fit your deck. But generally, you wouldn't see them used across the board in a high variety of decks. The next level I have is mid. Mid is where the power level of the cards a little better than what you'd see in your low-rated cards, but and it usually has more use. Something that you'd be happy to have in your deck, regardless. It might not be the powerhouse that makes your deck puts your deck over the top, but it's a card that you definitely wouldn't mind having and keeping as pretty much a role player in your deck for limited or constructed. Next up is high, and these are cards that are limited. These are cards that can change the game. Powerful creatures or spells that can turn the tide in a game that you might be losing, or one that puts you ahead in a game where you're just at parity or against your opponents. Or if you're ahead, it pretty much helps cement a victory for you. Same thing for constructed. These are cards that make the cut over lower and mid-level cards. A lot of cards that are efficient for their mana value versus the power that they generate for the deck. And then every once in a while, we have a card that is just epic. Just so over the top that it's unbelievable. It's a bomb, like a planeswalker or a very powerful spell or creature that completely changes the face of the game. In limited, this could be a powerful planeswalker, could be a really efficient creature that once it hits the battlefield, your opponents just have no answer for it, and you're able to run over them with it. In constructed, same type of thing. Just a card that can turn the tide in your favor. Good example might be like in the current standard Titan of Industry. A lot of times when that card hits the battlefield, it will help stabilize you. It helps you generate extra bodies with the Rhino token, and it lets you kind of stabilize your board position and sometimes get you back ahead of your opponent to win the game. So epic level cards. You probably won't see these as much, but there will be some. But it's definitely a card that you'd love to have in your deck. So that's the rating system, and now it's time to jump into the cards for Brothers War. And first up, we're going to be doing the white cards, and I have them organized by rarity first, so it goes common, uncommon, rare, then mythic, and we'll do that for each color. But so let's go ahead and jump into it and see what's new for the new Brothers War set. So the first card that we're going to preview is Aeronaut Cavalry. It's a common creature, 4 and a white, 3/4 power and toughness. It's a creature, human soldier, has flying, When Aeronaut Cavalry enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on another target soldier you control. I think for limited, this is actually probably a mid-level card. It gives, for 5 mana, you get a flyer, a 3/4 body, and there does appear to be, right off the bat for the set, there does appear to be a soldier tribal theme amongst white and blue. So this could actually benefit you, and you can, if you're drafting a deck or playing a sealed deck where you have a lot of soldiers, this will help you out quite a bit. And plus, it has the evasion ability of flying. This could be something that helps you close out a game. So I definitely like it as a mid-level card for limited. For constructed, though, I think I'm going to give it a low rating. There are just a lot of better cards you can use in the 5 mana slot. It has its role that it serves for limited, but for constructed, I don't see it going any higher than as just a low level card, low level creature. Next up, we have Airlift Chaplain, and this appears to be a cycle of creatures for each color. This one's a human cleric, so it's for 2 and a white, a 1/1 creature human cleric, has flying. When Airlift Chaplain enters the battlefield, mill 3 cards. You may put a plains card or a creature card with mana value 3 or less from among the cards milled this way into your hand. If you don't, put a +1/+1 counter on Airlift Chaplain. I actually do like this quite a bit, or pretty well in limited. I think I'll give it a mid rating. The fact that it has flying lets you mill 3 cards and either get you a land, a plains card. Look, and it says plains card, doesn't have to be a basic plains. So if you're playing with happen to have something that is also plains, but it's not non-basic, this will help you. That's more of something you'd probably see in constructed. But anyway, for back to limited, it's got flying, can let you get a land or a creature with mana value 3 or less. This can help you build your force in limited, and that's one thing that's definitely important to have when playing in a limited format, is keeping your team on schedule and continuously putting out threats to take out your opponents. For constructed, I think I'm gonna still give it a low rating. It's a cool card, but for the 3 mana slot, unless you're playing some kind of tribal cleric deck, I think this card has some uses, but I think they're better used in the limited format. So decent card, but probably couldn't see it going much higher than a low rating for constructed. Next card is Ambush Paratrooper. This is a creature for 1 and a white creature, human soldier, 1/2 power and toughness, has flash and flying, and you can pay a 5 generic mana for an activated ability, and creatures you control get +1/+1 until end turn. So kind of interesting. The first 3 common creatures we've seen so far all have flying. That's a telltale sign for a possible draft archetype that could be used for limited. So fairly decent there. Also, with this set, there's the inclusion of a lot of cards that create Power Stone tokens, and you can only use those Power Stone tokens to cast artifact spells, but you can also use it for activated abilities. So that might play a role in using the activated ability for the Ambush Paratrooper. That being said, I think I'm going to just go ahead and give this a low rating for limited. I don't think you're going to be able to use the activated ability as often as we might like. Mid to late game, I think you could do it. And if you have enough Power Stone tokens, I think you could definitely make good use of this activated ability. But it's hard to say how the format's going to play out if you're always having to be playing threats or having answers for your opponent's strategies. But if you hit the mid to the late game, you might be able to use Power Stone tokens to, or just your regular mana to utilize this activated ability. I think for constructed, I'm also going to give it a low rating. Like I said, in constructed, there's just so many good cards in the 2 mana slot, especially 2 mana. 2 and 3 mana seems to be the sweet spot for constructed as far as having some of your best cards in many of the constructed formats. So I think we'll give it a low rating across the board, and you'll probably see more use of this card in limited. Next up is Deadly Reposit. It's an instant for 1 and a white. Deadly Reposit deals 3 damage to target tapped creature, and you gain 3 life. I think this might be a card that, it's hard to say how all the removal is going to be in Brothers War limited format. I think it is somewhat limited in the way you're able to do it. It doesn't destroy a tapped creature. It only deals 3 damage. So it's hard to say. It might actually score a better rating as the format progresses, but for now I think I'll give it a low rating. You do gain 2 life. That is a positive. There might be better cards to put in the removal slot or 2 mana slot in your limited deck. Same thing for constructed. Just better removal spells for 2 mana that you can choose from. But might be something that you could use in your sealed deck or your limited deck. Next up is a reprint from the original Magic set, Disenchant. It's fitting that they put this card in the Brothers War set since it's 30th anniversary of Magic. This card has always been useful when it's been in any of the formats, and I think could come in useful in this limited format as well. There are quite a few artifacts that are available in the Brothers War, so I think I'm going to give this a low-end mid rating, just due to the fact that you can use it to destroy some of those huge artifact creatures that this set offers. And if you're able to play this at a timely time, you can take out one of your opponent's big creatures that they spent a bunch of mana to get it on the battlefield. For constructed, I think I'll give it a low rating. In today's constructed formats, they've printed many more dynamic cards that were offshoots of Disenchant that are just a little bit more powerful. But I could definitely see it as a sideboard card, especially if you're playing mono white or something that has a lot of white in it. So I wouldn't discount it completely, but it's situational, and I could definitely see it used in the sideboard. But for now, I'll just give it a low rating for constructed. But we'll have to see how it plays out in the standard format. Next up is Lauren's Escape. It's an instant for 1 white. It says target artifact or creature gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn, scry 1. I like this card. I like how they've been creating a lot of instances of sorceries that are kind of counters to some of the efficient removal that they've been printing lately. So they had to come up with some kind of balance, and I think this is one of them. The fact that you can give an artifact or a creature hexproof and indestructible. This actually could, if your opponent did have a disenchant and wanted to use it on one of your big artifact creatures, you could cast this in response and make your artifact creature indestructible, and have hexproof. So it's pretty nice. Plus, it has that little bonus to let you scry 1. It kind of reminds me of God's Willing from the Theros set way back in the day. Similar effect. That one gave you protection, your creature protection, and lets you scry 1. But this ability lets you do artifacts as well. So I'm going to give it a mid rating for limited. I like it. It's something I could see placed in the main deck and also brought in from the sideboard, but I wouldn't mind having it in my deck. It's definitely something I'd like to use. For constructed, I'll also give it a mid rating. This is something that I can see also used in the main deck. I could definitely see it being kept in the sideboard, especially if you are running cards or decks that are creature heavy and you're running into control decks. Bringing it out from the sideboard and putting them into your main deck will just kind of follow your opponent's plans when they try to remove a creature that you got, and you're able to cast this in response and just keep on going and doing what you're doing to take them out. So solid mid-rated card, I think. Next up is Military Discipline for 1 white. It's an enchantment aura. Has flash, enchant creature, When military discipline enters the battlefield, enchanted creature gains first strike until end of turn. Enchanted creature gets +1/+0. I like the idea of the card. The fact that it's an enchantment that has flash. I don't know how many cards in this set will give you benefits from using enchantment triggers, but it could serve that. However, if this was just an instant, a white instant, I would probably give it a low rating, and I think I'm going to do the same for this one. I could be missing something as far as some kind of interaction with some other cards in this set, but for now, at first glance, I'd probably give it a low rating for limited. Just not something I would put in the main deck right away. Same thing for constructed. However, in constructed, you can build a lot of decks that rely upon you casting enchantments, and you get a lot of triggers when you cast or an enchantment comes into play. So this would probably be at the high end of the low rating. Maybe it could be a low end mid rating card, but I feel more comfortable giving it a low rating for constructed. So cool idea. I like the card, but decent for a common. I'll say that. But just leave it at low for both formats. Next up, we have Phalanx Vanguard. It is a creature human soldier for 1 and a white, 2/2 power and toughness. It has vigilance. Whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, Phalanx Vanguard gets +1/+0 until end of turn. This could be a pretty good body in your limited deck. Depending on how many artifacts you're able to get into play continuously, this also could be a pretty good house to keep the pressure on your opponents early. I think I'm going to be a little generous with this and give it a mid rating for limited, and because you should be able to draft enough cards that could give you some Power Stone tokens, not to mention all the other artifacts in the set that might let you get triggers off this every turn. Plus, you don't have to tap to attack with it. It's got vigilance, and it's a 2-drop, so you're able to attack your opponents early. And then for constructed, I'll give it a low rating. I mean, it's competing with a sea of endless creatures at the 2-mana drop spot. If you're building a human soldier tribal deck, this might work, serve its purpose and be a little bit better. But I think for now, we'll go mid for limited and low for constructed, and see how it plays out for it. All right, next card is Power Stone Engineer. It's a creature for 1 and a white, a human artificer, 2/1 power and toughness. When Power Stone Engineer dies, create a tapped Power Stone token. So this is the first card we've had that generates a Power Stone token. Now I'll just read the reminder text that it has. It says, it's a Power Stone token. It's an artifact with tap, add colorless. This mana can't be spent to cast non-artifact spells. So it can only be used to cast artifact spells, but it doesn't say you can't use it to pay for activated abilities. So that's just something to keep in mind. But yeah, it lets you, when it dies, lets you create a token, and this actually could help benefit with creatures that trigger when artifacts come into play, like the last card we spotlighted. So I think for limited though, hard to say. I'm going to give it a mid rating, just due to the fact that it's a 2-drop, could be pretty efficient, depending on the speed of this format, and of the Brothers War limited format, and the fact that when it dies, it creates a Power Stone token, so it leaves a little gift behind for you. For constructed, I'm going to go low on this, unless you're building a Power Stone deck or some kind of a human deck that relies upon getting artifacts. Has somewhat of a limited use in constructed, but we'll see how it goes since nobody's played with these cards yet. So mid rating for limited and low for constructed. Okay, so the next card is Prison Sentence for 2 and a white. It's an enchantment aura. Enchant creature. When Prison Sentence enters the battlefield, scry 2. Enchanted creature can attack or block, and its activated abilities can't be activated. Yeah, decent removal card. I like this. It's basically a better version of Arrest. I don't know if you all remember that card from, I think it was originally appeared in Mercadian Masks, and then it was in Return to Ravnica. I think Scars of Mirrodin as well. Maybe a few other sets when it was in Standard, but pretty much the same card with the exception this has tacked on a Scry 2 ability, which is nice. It does act as a removal spell, something to neutralize one of your opponent's threats, so I think I'm going to give it a mid rating for limited. Any kind of removal that takes them out of combat, renders them useless, and where they can't use any of their activated abilities is fairly decent. I mean, your opponent can still sacrifice the creature or bounce it back, but other than that, they're pretty much in a jail cell for the rest of the game. So yeah, I think I like it for limited, the mid rating. For constructed, they're just better. Once again, coming into that crunch where there's just so many cards to choose from in constructed, it loses out to other more efficient removal spells at the three mana slot. It is an enchantment, so it might fit into an enchantment focused deck, and it might serve a good purpose there. Or in Commander, this is pretty good if your opponent's got an annoying commander on the battlefield. You just slap this on the battlefield, send them to prison, and they can't do anything. I mean, it's better than them being able to send their commander back to their command zone where they could just recast it later. So this is a nice little side route to neutralizing your opponent's commander. So yeah, I think we'll go mid for limited and low for constructed. Next card is Recommission. For 1 and a white, it's a sorcery. Return target artifact or creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. If a creature enters the battlefield this way, it enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. That's actually pretty decent. If you think about it, you're paying 2 mana value to get a artifact or creature with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So there's a bit of a discount there. And if it's a creature, you get a +1/+1 counter on it. This is a good way to rebound too from some of the removal spells. Your opponent blows your creature off the battlefield. You just cast this. It's a small enough creature. You're able to get it back with a +1/+1 counter. So I think this will find its uses in the game for limited. I like it. So I'll give it a mid rating. I think it's solid. Something that I would definitely be happy with putting in my draft deck or sealed deck for sure. For constructed, gosh, this is right on that line between low and mid, but I think I'm going to have to give it a low rating, but it'll be right on that line between low and a mid-range card. Now, if you're playing a deck with a lot of creatures and you've got some really cool, really efficient 3-drop creatures that really pose a problem for your opponents, this could be a good card to use to bring them back. Actually, I'll give you a good example. For Modern, for example, you've got your Tarmogoyf and your opponent blows it off the battlefield. There goes a good 8/9 creature into your graveyard. Well, next turn you'll just cast this, bring it back, and it comes back with a +1/+1 counter on it. So now it's a 9/10. So just that's a pretty wild scenario, but it's a realistic one that could happen. So something that it might have its uses for. I could also see it being used in the sideboard as well. So, but I think a low rating for now. Just due to the fact, once again, constructed competes for card slots. Really, it's really demanding for what is needed to make the cut in a deck. But yeah, so we'll go mid and then low. So starting with this set, well, at least for this set, they grouped artifacts with color identity with the color that they're part of. So, for example, white has many artifacts with white activated or abilities or alternate costs, and so numerically, Wizards group them with the white cards. And so this is our first one. It's a scrap work cohort for 4 colorless. It's a artifact creature soldier. When scrapwork When Scrapwork Cohort enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature token, and it's a 3/1 power and toughness. So that's kind of interesting. So you get a 4 total power between those two creatures. And it also has Unearth, which is 2 generic and a white. And since we haven't covered Unearth yet, I'll go ahead and read its text, its rules text. For 2 and a white, you can return this card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste. Exile it at the beginning of the next end step, or if it would leave the battlefield, exile. Unearth only as a sorcery. So you get a one-time flashback basically on it, and it just exiles at the beginning of the end step, or if it leaves the battlefield. Not bad. I mean, for the Unearth ability as well, paying just 2 and a white, you can bring it back with a 3/1 and you get a token out of it. So another 4 power. Wow, this could be pretty darn useful in limited. It's hard to say though how the speed of the format will be. And there could be more efficient unearth cards, so it's hard to say. I think I'm going to go ahead, and for now, I'm going to go ahead and give it a low rating for limited, and then for constructed, I'll do the same. Just right now, it's hard to say. I mean, course constructed, there's just a lot of better creatures, but for limited, it's hard to say what the decks are going to look like entirely. But this is a card I would still probably put in the deck as a pawn or a filler card, and it does have that extra ability of Unearth. Plus, you get the token out of it. So, and if you're playing soldier theme, this could actually come in and really boost your deck. So it actually might be worthy of a mid rating for a soldier based draft deck. Just something to keep in mind, but we'll see how the Unearth ability plays out with these new artifacts and creatures for Brothers War. Next common is Survivor of Corliss. Survivor of Corliss for 1 white. Creature, human soldier. It's a 1/1, has first strike, and you can pay 1 and a white. Exile Survivor of Corliss from your graveyard. Lets you scry 2. So basically, it's a Tundra Wolf. I don't know if you guys remember that from one of the early sets, but it's a 1/1 first striker, and it has an activated ability to let you scry 2 from exile it from your graveyard. In draft, I think, or sealed deck, this could be a good early threat. I think the best rating I could give it is a low rating, but if you're playing early threats in your limited decks or your sealed deck, this is ideal for it. So I wouldn't mind having it in the deck, but there might be better stuff that you have available to fill that slot. So, but I wouldn't complain if I had to use this card. I think it's decent for that purpose. For constructed, just give it a low rating. 1 mana drops, pretty decent for strike. It might go well in a Weenie White deck, but that's kind of got a narrow focus for it. So it is a human, it is a soldier, and it does have first strike, and it's a 1-drop. So you can see it in a few different constructed decks, but overall, it's not something I would see used a lot across the board for many Weenie White decks or anything like that. Next common is Takacia's Onulet. It's for 5 generic. It's an artifact creature construct, 4/4, power and toughness. When Takacia's Onulet leaves the battlefield, you gain 2 life. So that's a play off the original Onulet, I think from the original set, which was a 3-drop 2/2 that had the same triggered ability when it died or left the battlefield. But this one, a little bigger body, and it has Unearth for 3 and a white. So you're able to bring it back and get 1 more attack with it. So looks like the Unearth abilities so far are cheaper than the regular mana value for the card. So that's kind of nice, but it does require white. So I think I'll give it a low rating for limited. Decent body. It's a card that I could have as a filler, but if there are better 5-drops, I'll probably use those over this. But it does have Unearth as the redeeming quality. Same thing for constructed. Unless you're playing a narrow focused artifact deck or construct type deck, or even just an unearthed deck, it might fit in well with that. But overall, I think I'll just give it a low rating for constructed. Our next common is Union of the Third Path. It's for 2 generic and a white. It's an instant. Draw a card, then you gain life equal to the number of cards in your hand. This is an interesting card. Kind of reminds me, I don't know if any of you remember or were playing back in the day, there was a white sorcery called Gerard's Wisdom. Lets you gain 2 life for each card in your hand. This is kind of interesting because this lets you draw a card and you gain 1 life for you gain life equal to the number of cards in your hand. So kind of similar. It's just you don't get two life. You only just get 1 life essentially for each card in your hand. In a control deck, I could definitely see this being a solid card, something that lets you draw. It's basically a cantrip, lets you draw a card and gain life to kind of help stabilize you a little bit. In limited, unless you're playing a dedicated control deck, I don't really see this being too highly desirable. But in some of those certain decks, I see it. It could be an option. But for now, I think I'll just give it a low rating for limited. And for constructed, in the control deck constructed type decks, I would give it a mid rating. I think that's decent. I mean, it's got enough use that it still could be useful, even if you don't have any cards in your hand. You just have that 1 card. Draw a card, gain a life is basically what it is. If you have no cards in your hand, so I think it's worthy of a mid rating constructed. There's a lot of uses you can find for it. So yeah, we'll go with that rating for those 2. Next card is Veteran's Power Blade for 3 generic. It's an artifact equipment. It has equipped creature +2/+0 and equipped soldier for a white, or you can just equip for 2 generic. So there's the soldier theme again. And we've seen a few of those in white so far for the common slots. Yeah, I mean, could be something that's useful. A lot of times, even in limited decks, it's sometimes tough to find slots for equipment unless they're highly efficient. In a soldier deck, I think I would give this probably a mid rating. But if you're not playing soldiers, it kind of loses that luster in that sense. So it just becomes a +2/+0 equipment for equip 2. So I think I'll give it a low rating for limited, unless you're playing a soldier themed draft deck or sealed deck, then I'd probably give it a mid rating. For constructed, I think I'll also do the same. There's just better equipment out there in constructed, but it might serve a purpose. You never know. When you're on the battlefield and you really need a weapon, it might be the only thing available, and you just have to pick it up and use it. So we'll go with low though for this card. Our next card is Warlord's Elite for 2 and a white. It's a creature, human soldier, 4/4 power and toughness. That's pretty good. As an additional cost to cast this spell, tap 2 untapped artifacts, creatures, and/or lands you control. Huh, not bad. So theoretically, you could get this out for 3 mana for a 4/4. You happen to have Power Stones on the battlefield, or a couple creatures that just came into play. You're not going to be able to really attack with them anyway, so you could just tap them to pay the additional cost for the spell. Could be useful. Let's see here. However, if you don't have any artifacts or creatures, then you have to pay, tap 2 more lands to get this on the battlefield. So, hard to say. It is a soldier, though. I think because of the uncertainty of it, I'm going to give it a low rating. I could regret that, and it actually ends up being a bomb for a common, but it's hard to say. Just depends on how many Power Stone tokens or creature tokens you're able to generate in your draft or sealed decks. So we'll see. For standard, I'll give it a low rating as well. They've printed many highly powered, highly efficient creatures at three mana slot, so that are better than this. So, but could be good in tribal deck or a token deck as well too. So that's something to keep in mind. Even in Commander as well, you could. There's all sorts of stuff you can tap to get this out quick. So just something to keep in mind. It might actually be worthy of a mid rating and constructed for those type of decks. Our next common is Yoshin Medic. For 2 and a white, it is creature, human, cleric, soldier, 1/4 lifelink. This actually could be a fairly decent body. It's got lifelink, 1/4. It's basically a horn turtle, but it has lifelink slapped onto it. Hard to say. I think I'm just gonna give it a low rating for limited. Yeah, I mean, it does give you lifelink and stuff. It is a human cleric soldier, so it fills any slots needed for those archetypes. But yeah, I think a 1/4 or 3 right now with lifelink. We'll give it a low for now, but it might be something you might want to use for the type of deck you're playing in limited. Constructed, also low. I think there are better cards to use in the 3 mana slot. So once again, unless this is a tribal card, it's kind of got a narrow focus for the most part. But so we'll just go low across the board for both of those. Okay, so we're on to the uncommons now. The first uncommon is Calamity's Wake. For 1 and a white, it's an instant. Exile all graveyards. Players can't cast non-creature spells this turn. Exile Calamity's Wake. Interesting. Exile all graveyards. Players can't cast non-creature spells this turn. Don't see much use for this in limited. Unless your opponent is playing a dedicated graveyard deck or a heavy control deck. I don't see it being used much in limited, so I think I'll give it a low rating. Constructed has an interesting. I see it being a sideboard card, maybe being brought in against control deck or mid-range deck that's got some annoying spells you got to deal with. This also could be a good card to kind of set up a combo for you in Constructed, where you play this at the beginning of the upkeep and lets you kind of have free reign to do something with some creatures or something like that. Getting the right cards into play where they can't respond to it. So it is kind of narrow. So I think I'm going to give it a low rating for Constructed as well. I could be missing something here, but I'm sure somebody sees it, will see it, and have a good use for it in Constructed and find something for a particular deck. Good toolbox card that you can bring in from the sideboard, or maybe even using the main deck to set up something. But overall, though, for the generic or the decks in general, I would say low for both of those, Constructed and limited. Our next uncommon, it's actually it's an artifact creature. It's Combat Thresher for 7 generic. It's an artifact creature construct. So this is our first prototype card. And so prototype cards have 2 different costs. So I'll just read the regular cost for it, and then I'll read prototype, what it does afterwards. So it's a 7 generic artifact creature, 3/3 body, double strike. When Combat Thresher enters the battlefield, draw a card. Or it has prototype, where it says for prototype, you may cast the spell with different mana cost, color, and size. It keeps its abilities and types. So if you pay the prototype cost, it will for prototype cost for 2 and a white. It enters the battlefield as a 1/1 white artifact creature construct with double strike and you can draw a card. Or you can pay the full price for it, which is the 7, and it comes into play as a colorless artifact creature with double strike, and you can draw a card. Let's see here. Well, even just as a 1/1 double striker for 2 and a white, letting you draw a card, yeah, that's not bad. I kind of like that. I think I'll give it a mid rating for limited. Early on, it has its uses, and then in the late game, you can also cast it for its full cost. I mean, staring them the barrel of a 3/3 double strike, which means that lets them draw a card. That can get pretty nasty, especially if you have some kind of combat trick or an aura or something like that to pump it up even more. Get out of hand for whoever's being attacked by it during the game. So yeah, I think I like it mid for limited. For constructed, I think I'll give it a low rating. It's hard to say. I know 7's pretty high for a constructed deck, although there's a lot of mana producing cards in this set, so it's kind of hard to say right away. But overall, though, I think I'd probably just give it a low. There are just so many options to choose from, but you never know. It could fit into the right type of theme deck that features artifacts or constructs and stuff like that. Those can end up pumping each other. Oh, the other advantage with this card is if you have a blink effects, you can continuously blink this card and be able to draw a card for it each time enters the battlefield. So that is something to keep in mind. That might be worthy of bumping it up to the mid rating, but I think for now we'll just give it low for constructed, mid for limited. Next card is Great Desert Prospector. For 4 and a white, it's a creature, human artificer, 3/2 power and toughness. When Desert Prospector enters the battlefield, create a tapped Power Stone token for each other creature you control. Wow. That can get pretty wild. You have just a few other creatures on the battlefield. You can get power tokens. If you have a bunch of tokens on the battlefield, and you have them in abundance, you're going to be getting a lot of Power Stone tokens. And then later on, that lets you ramp into other big stuff. So I like this card. I think I'll give it a mid rating for limited. And I think the same thing for constructed. You could probably do some pretty crazy stuff with this. The only drawback for it in constructed is its mana value. It's 4 and a white. That is kind of high. I mean, it is high for limited as well, but the payoff might be greater just due to the fact that you're getting these Power Stone tokens, which helps you ramp into other larger artifacts or activated abilities to play. So something to keep in mind. But yeah, I think I feel comfortable giving it a mid rating across the board in both formats for it. Our next uncommon is Lay Down Arms for 1 white. It's a sorcery. That's something to keep in mind. Exile target creature with mana value less than or equal to the number of planes you control. Its controller gains 3 life. So it's a good thing. The reason why I say it's something to keep in mind is a sorcery. Initially, when I saw this card, I thought it was an instant. It just screams Swords to Plowshares if you have a lot of planes, but it's not. You know, it is a good removal spell. I do like it. I think I'm going to give it a... I mean, if you're playing white, and even if half the deck you're playing is white, you're going to have more than 3 planes. It's probably going to settle in right around 4 planes that you'll have, maybe higher. That'll let you get rid of any creature on the battlefield. So I'm going to give it a high rating for limited. I really like it. And if you're playing a white heavy deck, it's even more powerful. For constructed, yeah, of course, you're not going to be able to splash this into a control deck, a 5-color control deck, unless you're playing a bunch of dual lands or shock lands. And that can be a problem. It is dependent on the type of lands you have in play. So I think for constructed, I'll give it a mid rating. if it was in a mono white deck or a say a white green deck or white blue deck, and you've got really good amount of planes, it could be worthy of the high slot. But I think for now we'll give it mid. It is nice that it's only 1 white mana to cast, so I think this will definitely see constructed play, at least in standard, possibly in Pioneer. But there's a lot of options at one white mana for exile effects for creatures. But just another tool to add to the toolbox. Not necessarily something you have to always use, but it's there if you need it. So I think we'll go high and mid for limited and constructed. Our next uncommon is Lauren, Disciple of History for a 3 and a white. It's a legendary creature, human artificer for 3/3 power and toughness. Whenever Lauren, Disciple of History, or another legendary creature enters the battlefield under your control, return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. There are several legendary creatures in this set, and there, of course, are a lot of artifacts, so this could actually be pretty decent to have. I think I would, I think because of the nature of this set, I'm going to give it a high rating for limited. I think you might be able to take advantage of the triggered ability quite a bit, regardless if it's in constructed or limited. I think you'll be able to get this go off a couple times. And that being said, I'll give it a mid rating for constructed, just due to the fact that it competes with a lot of other cards in the 4 mana value slot and for what it does. But strong card, I like it. I can see this being played in a Joven deck, or some kind of deck like that. I'm sorry, I misspoke. Not Joven, Joda deck. So many J's, but yeah, I can see that being played in one of those decks, and comes into play. It uses its triggered ability. Actually get pretty wild, but yeah, it's a solid card. 3/3 body with a triggered ability, and bring stuff back from your graveyard to your hand. So that's pretty decent. So our next uncommon is Mass Production for 5 and a colorless. I'm sorry, 5 and a white. It's a sorcery. Create 4 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature tokens. Well, this actually, I think this card's pretty decent. You're getting 4 1/1 tokens. They are colorless soldier artifact creature tokens. You're going to get triggers off your artifacts and your soldiers when these come into play. So I kind of like this card. I think I'll give it a high rating for limited. I think there's a lot of crazy stuff you might be able to do with this card. And if I saw it passed to me or showed up in my Seal deck, I would find a way to get it into the deck and play it. For constructed, I think I'm going to give it a low rating. Once again, it suffers from the, I guess you could say, the exclusiveness of the card slots available in constructed decks. So it's not going to show up in every deck or anything like that. And it's even then for soldier decks or artifact decks, it's going to compete with a lot of other cards. So I think it could serve its purpose, but for now, that's kind of a narrow focus. So I think I'll just go ahead and give it a low rating for constructed. Our next uncommon is Meticulous Excavation. It's an enchantment for 1 white. It has an activated ability of 2 and a white, and it says return target permanent you control to its owner's hand. If it has Unearth, instead exile it, then return that card to its owner's hand. Activate only once. Activate only during your turn. Well, that's a kind of a neat ability. So this is really good with cards that have ETB effects or the Unearth ability. Get Unearth a creature, bring it back into play, attack with it, do its stuff, and instead of it being exiled as part of the Unearth triggered ability, you just return it to your hand and you're able to recast it like a normal creature. So the only thing is you can only use it during your turn, but still, that's It has its uses. I like it. I think I'm going to give it... I'll give it a mid rating for limited. I'm right on that line between mid and high. Just seeing the number of unearthed cards in the set, I think it could be pretty powerful. Plus, not to mention any of the ETB triggers that you could continuously reuse. But it just have to see how well that plays out. It's hard to say right now without actually playing the cards and seeing how the environment is. For constructed, I'll also give it a mid rating. There's a lot of uses for this, so plenty of things you could keep returning to your hand and recasting to cause problems for your opponents. So yeah, I think I'll give it a mid across the board for both formats there. Our next card is Recruitment Officer. For 1 white, it's a creature human soldier, 2/1 power and toughness. That's pretty efficient. And it's got an activated ability of 3 and a white, and look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card with mana value 3 or less from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Yeah, that's pretty solid. Early game, this is just a quick beatdown card, and can put a lot of pressure on your opponents. Mid to late game, you start digging through the top 4 cards of your library and put creature cards with mana value 3 or less into your hand. As the game gets longer and longer, the more valuable the activated ability becomes. So, and you can, if you have a lot of mana available, like Power Stone tokens, you can trigger this ability, activate this ability multiple times. So, something to keep in mind. And I could see that being pulled off in limited and constructed. So, I do like it. I think I'll give it a mid rating for limited. It's right on that border between mid and high, but I definitely like it. I think it's a solid card. I think the only downside of it is it has a 1 toughness, so it can die pretty easily. So that's just something to keep in mind. But decent card. I would love to have that in my deck. Same thing for constructed. Pretty solid. I would definitely have 4 of these in my mono white deck, and like to be able to use it mid to late game to keep filling my hand up. So both of these mid ratings for limited and constructed, though, I'd put them at the high end of that. It's right on that border between mid and high, so something to keep in mind. But it's a solid card. I like it. So our next card is Repair and Recharge for 3 and 2 white. It's a sorcery. Return target artifact, enchantment, or planeswalker card from your graveyard to the battlefield and create a tapped Power Stone token. So it doesn't bring any creatures back, but it does say artifacts. So any artifact creatures or enchantment creatures you could bring back. That's pretty cool. And it can let you bring back a planeswalker from your graveyard to the battlefield. So that's pretty solid. Yeah, I would maybe put one of these in my limited deck. Definitely. I like it as a mid-range card, mid-level card. For constructed, same deal, especially in a commander deck. But I could even see constructed play in standard, maybe just having 1 in a deck or something like that. Plus, it lets you get a Power Stone token. So I think I feel comfortable giving it a grade for a solid mid-level rating for both limited and constructed. A lot of stuff you can do with it. Next one is Static Net for 3 and a white. It's an enchantment. When Static Net enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls until Static Net leaves the battlefield. When Static Net enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life and create a tapped Power Stone token. So they're continuing with the theme of these white enchantments that when they ETB, they exile a non-land permanent. And like the one that they had for Dominar United, this one also lets you gain 2 life, but you also get a Power Stone token with it too. So, yeah, it's an answer for any kind of permanent. So that's not a land. So I think it's good. Good removal spell. Pretty solid. I give it a high rating for limited. Constructed, I'll give it a mid-level rating, And just due to the fact that you do have enchantments like this in Constructed that cost a little bit less that do the same thing. But still a solid card. Good removal answer for any kind of non-land permanent. So I wouldn't mind having him in my deck, but I think it'll be even more powerful in Limited, just due to the fact that there's not as much of good stuff like this available in Limited. So give it a high and a mid for Limited and Constructed. Next uncommon is Thopter Architect for a 3 and a white. Creature, Human Artificer. 2/3 power and toughness. Whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, target creature gains flying until end of turn. That's cool. I have a feeling between artifact creature tokens and power stone tokens, you'll be able to get this to trigger quite a bit. And it's just a 2/3 body. I think I'll give it a mid rating for Limited. The downside of it is if you don't have any of that stuff coming into play or anything like that, it's just a 2/3 body. So, but still, I think oftentimes you're going to be able to get this to trigger and send over some of your best creatures to evade your opponents and hit them in the face to deliver some damage. I think for Constructed, I'll give it a low rating, just due to the fact that in Constructed, you've got a lot of creatures that have flying on their own, and they don't really need this extra ability. So this is more of a card that you'll see play in Limited than you would in Constructed. I think this is our final uncommon. It's a Yoshin Frontliner for 1. Artifact Creature Soldier, 1/1 power and toughness. Whenever Yoshin Frontliner attacks, another target creature you control gets +1/+1 until end of turn, and you can earn it for 1 white. Pretty solid. Especially in a soldier themed deck. I could see this being pretty solid paired up with some other creatures as it attacks. And then if it dies, you just bring it back one time with Unearth. So I like it. I think it's an efficient 1-drop for what it does. I'll give it a mid rating for Limited. Just a solid 1-drop I'd like to have in my deck. For Constructed, I think this would be a pretty solid card, in probably worthy of a mid rating for Constructed in like a weenie deck, weenie white deck, or an aggro deck of some type. I think I'll give it a mid rating for Constructed as well. I was debating if I should go low with it, but I think just due to the fact that it works with any creature, when it attacks, it gives it a +1/+1 bonus. That's pretty decent. And yeah, I think it could have some useful utility in Constructed decks. Maybe fortifying your legendary creatures, or one of your creatures you just want to be able to keep on the battlefield and strengthen it a little bit more. I think they could help with that. So yeah, we'll go mid for both Limited and Constructed for the Ocean Frontliner. All right, so moving on to the rares now. Our first rare is Autonomous Assembler for 5 generic mana. It's an artifact creature, assembly worker, 4/5 power and toughness. Its abilities has vigilance, and you can pay 1 generic and tap it to put a +1/+1 counter on target assembly worker you control. Or you can pay its prototype cost for 1 colorless and 1 white. It comes into play as a 2/2 power and toughness with the same abilities. Yeah, I think if you've got a lot of assembly workers, this could be pretty decent. This also works on itself, so it can get bigger and bigger. And the fact that it has vigilance, you can still attack with it, and then at the end of turn, your opponent's turn, you can just pay the 1 and tap it to put a +1/+1 counter on it. So yeah, it's pretty solid. I like it. I think if it goes unchecked, it could start to overwhelm your opponent. So that's pretty good. And yeah, it's pretty good. I think I'm going to give it a I think I'd give it a high rating. The reason why I also give it a high rating is it's not limited to just targeting itself. You're going to target any assembly worker. So if you get any of those, any kind of creature token that's an assembly worker, and any other artifact creature that's an assembly worker, you could take advantage of this ability for it. Or you can just, and then, you know, the fact that it can come into play as a 2/2 or a 4/5, that's pretty good too. I think for limited, I'm sorry, for constructed, I'll give it a mid rating. Yeah, I think mid's right about right for this card. I think it'll see more play in something like Commander or maybe a cube. But the cube is limited, but something like Commander or a dedicated tribal deck or artifact creature deck, it'll find its place. So pretty solid card though for what it does. But yeah, I think high and mid. That's about how I feel for those formats. So our next rare is Kayla's Command. This is our first command card. I believe there's one of each command, or one command for each color. So this is pretty good. So it costs 1 and 2 white to sorcery. You can choose 2. Create a 2/2 colorless construct artifact creature token. Put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control. It gains double strike until end of turn. That's pretty good. Search your library for a basic plains card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle, and then you gain 2 life and scry 2. Yeah, can make a creature token, put a counter on things, give it a double strike. You can helps you with some mana fixing by getting plains, and lets you gain 2 life and then scry, and that helps you with your draw. Yeah, I think for what it does, I think I'll give it a high rating for limited, and probably a mid rating for now. That might be a little stingy in the constructed area. It's hard to say. Kind of want to see it in action in the constructed format, especially in standard. But I think it could be something useful in limited as well. I mean, it gets you a 2/2 artifact creature token, and you can put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control. Giving a double strike, that can actually make a difference in the game. So yeah, I feel high and mid for both of those formats. Next up is Kayla's Reconstruction. It's X and 3 white. Sorcery. Look at the top 7 cards of your library. Put up to X artifact and or creature cards with mana value 3 or less from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in random order. Interesting. So with this card, I don't see why you would pay anything more than 7, because you can only look at the top 7 cards of your library. And then lets you put an artifact or creature with mana value 3 or less. And the number of those is based on X as well. So yeah, that's pretty solid, especially if you have a deck that's usually between its core number of creatures is in 2 or 3 drop area. It can be pretty solid. I like this for limited. I think I'll give it a high rating for limited, just due to the fact that there is a lot of ways to generate mana in this set, it looks like, and being able to get up to 7 to 10 mana could help you quite a bit, and these go straight onto the battlefield, so that's pretty nice. I think high for constructed as well. I like it. You get some pretty efficient 3 drops, and if you paid the full, say 7 is X, and then the 3 white, you could theoretically you could get 7 creatures on the battlefield, each with mana value 3 or less. So that could be pretty powerful, and especially if you have a way of manipulating the order your cards come up from your library by scrying or something like that. This could be pretty decent. So I like it in the high slot for both of these. pretty powerful. This could be pretty wild in Commander too, so something to consider there. Cool use of a card. Moving on to the next rare, we have Lauren of the Third Path. It's for 2 and a white, legendary creature, human artificer, 2/1 power and toughness. It has vigilance. When Lauren of the Third Path enters the battlefield, destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment. That's useful. And you can tap it, you and target opponent each draw a card. Yeah, that's a solid card. I think I will give it a high rating for limited and constructed. The fact that it's a 2/1 vigilance, when it enters the battlefield, you can destroy an artifact or enchantment. And it looks like in this set, there's a lot of artifact creatures, large, big artifact creatures that you can use this to get rid of them. Plus, if you're in a pinch and you need to draw a card, you can use this. You can let your opponents draw a card. Cool thing is, in constructed, you can choose, like in Commander, you can choose the opponent. That probably won't hurt you the most, but and also another reason it's high, and I'd give it a high rating in constructed, is because of not only artifact creatures but enchantment creatures are running around. There's some pretty annoying enchantments that can really cause a lot of problems for people, and this is an excellent way to ETB into play and wipe out that enchantment. So pretty solid, good utility card. I could definitely see it being mainboarded in several white focused decks. Next rare is Siege Veteran for 2 and a white. It's a creature, human soldier, 2/2 power and toughness. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. That's pretty good. And whenever another non-token soldier you control dies, create a 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature token. Wow, that's really solid. So it's pretty much a Luminarch Aspirant. I don't know if you remember that card from Zendikar Rising, but has that same triggered ability at the beginning of combat, but then also when you have a non-token soldier dies, you get to create a artifact creature that's a soldier token. And that can trigger a lot of other triggered abilities if you have other permanents that depend on those type of things. So I definitely like this. I'm going to give it a high rating for limited and constructed. A lot of uses for it. I can see this going into the mono white decks, and even though it's 1 more generic mana more to cast than the Luminarch Aspirant, I think from Zendikar Rising, I think it can still see some play. So especially in a soldier focused deck that has a lot of soldiers. So I like it. Solid card. Can't wait to try it out. Constructed and limited. Next is Soul Partition. For 1 and a white, it's an instant. Exile target non-land permanent. For as long as that card remains exiled, its owner may play it. A spell cast by an opponent this way costs 2 more to cast. So it's an interesting card. It's kind of a play on the recent stuff they've been doing with spells being taxed with an additional 2 generic mana. So it's a decent card. I could see it being used against some big annoying threats that the only way to really truly deal with them is exiling them. So interesting card. I'm curious how this would interact with a commander card. It kind of, I don't know if it would tack on additionally to the commander with the commander tax. That's something to keep in mind. Might have to look that up in the set release notes, but yeah, it's a solid card. It's definitely a tempo disruptor against your opponents, set them off schedule, and helps you out. So for 2 mana, that's pretty decent. I like it. I'll give it a high rating for both limited and constructed. So our next rare is an artifact creature angel, Steel Seraph for 6 generic, power and toughness 5/4. It has flying. At the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature you control gains your choice of flying, vigilance, or lifelink until end of turn. Or you can pay its prototype cost for 1 and 2 white, and it's a 3/3. Enters the battlefield as a 3/3 white artifact creature angel with the same triggered abilities and flying. I'm gonna give this a epic rating for limited. I think this could actually be really powerful. The fact that it has its own evasion, and then it can also give one of your other creatures flying, vigilance, or lifelink. That's pretty solid. That can win you games just outright, especially if you've got the battlefield clogged up on the ground. So it helps you get ahead to win. It helps break stalemate. It also can help you come from behind with the lifelink ability, or just stabilize one of your creatures to be a blocker as well as an attacker to hold off one of your opponent's attacks. So that's pretty solid. Can perform the same thing in constructed. I think the only thing that really knocks it down from an epic level to high in constructed is just the efficiency of removal and the efficiency of other creatures in the formats. So cool card though. I like it. I think we'll see this used quite a bit. Next card is Takacious Welcome. It's a 2 and a white for an enchantment. Whenever one or more creatures with mana value 3 or less enter the battlefield under your control, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. Yeah, I mean, they're really pushing the... seems like in white so far, they're really pushing the aggressive creatures, low mana value curve, and being able to replenish your hand by drawing cards. So that's pretty solid. I think I'll give it a... give it a mid rating for, I'm sorry, a high rating for limited. Same thing for constructed. Both formats, you're going to be most of your creatures are going to be 3 or less. So you're going to be able to get this to trigger quite a bit. So I like it. It's a good way for it to replenish your hand, especially mid to late game. So now we're moving on to the Mythic Rares. And our first one is In the Trenches. It's for 1, 2 white. It's an enchantment. And it gives your creatures you control +1/+1. Plus it has an activated ability of 5 colorless and 1 white. Exile target non-land permanent you don't control until end of turn. I'm sorry. Let me reread that. Exile target non-land permanent you don't control until In the Trenches leaves the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery and only once. So that's kind of cool. It has a... Pretty much it's a Glorious Anthem type card that pumps your team, and then you can pay the activated ability to exile a non-land permanent until this leaves the battlefield, just using it only once. So it kind of lets you impose threat against your opponent without actually activating it. Threat of activation is a real thing. So that's something you can use against your opponents. Pretty solid. I think I'll give it a high rating for limited. I think constructed, because of the activated ability, I'd give it a high rating as well. So I think it'll see play in standard, and I can see decks running maybe anywhere from 1 to the full 4 copies, who knows. And with the way things are going to be able to generate a lot of mana, it might not be a problem to use the activated ability. So pretty solid card. Our next mythic is Muriel, Shield of Argive. For 3 and a white, the legendary creature Human Soldier, 3/4 power and toughness. During your turn, your opponents can't cast spells or activated abilities of artifacts, creatures, or enchantments. That's cool. Whenever Muriel, Shield of Argive attacks, create X 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature tokens, where X is the number of soldiers you control. Wow, that's really powerful. So the more soldiers you control, the more tokens you're going to make. It's kind of like Adeline, Resplendent Cathar, and Rabble Rousing rolled into 1 card. Yeah, this card's crazy. I'm going to give it epic for limited and constructed. I think this is going to see play. Unchecked, this will win you the game. So, pretty solid card. Love the artwork. Love the design for it. Strong, decent power and toughness, and spits out a ton of creatures. So, pretty decent. Good way to use a slot for a mythic card. I like it. Our next mythic is Platoon Dispenser. It's for 5 colorless. Artifact creature construct, 4/6 power and toughness. At the beginning of your end step, if you control 2 or more other creatures, draw a card. That's cool. And you can pay 3 and a white and create a 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature token. That's cool. And you can unearth it for 2 and 2 white. That's why it's so it's got the 2 and 2 white unearth ability. Yeah, that's pretty decent. That could get pretty crazy. I like it. I think I'll give it a high rating for limited and constructed. Got a big body. It creates soldier tokens and you can unearth it. And if you have 2 or more, control 2 or more other creatures, you can draw a card at the beginning of your end step. So pretty solid. Not going to win the game for you on its own, but left unchecked, it will. And it can help stabilize, I think, with the big body it has for you. So plus you can unearth it. So that's kind of nice. Yeah, I think high is a good slot for it. I think this might be our last mythic. Urza's Silex for 3 colorless. It's a legendary artifact. Has an activated ability of 2 and 2 white. You can tap it, exile Urza's Silex. Each player chooses 6 lands they control. Destroy all other permanents, activate only as a sorcery. When Urza's Silex is put into exile from the battlefield, you may pay 2. If you do, search your library for a Planeswalker card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Wow, yeah, this is a cool card. Kind of similar to Karn's Silex, and it's kind of nice. It doesn't enter the battlefield tapped, so you can use it as soon as it comes into play if you have the mana. Pretty solid. And the fact that you can pay 2 extra to go get a Planeswalker card, that's cool. If any of you are familiar with the backstory for the Brothers' War, you guys will remember that Urza used the Silex, or I should say, spoiler alert. But Urza used the Silex to end the war, and it destroyed a lot of things and devastated the plane of Dominaria. And that's kind of when he got his Planeswalker Spark. And this is a nod to that. Lets you go get a Planeswalker card from your library and put it in your hand. And the fact that it destroys all permanents other than 6 lands for each player, that's pretty solid. That kind of signifies the onset of the Ice Age. Well-themed card, well designed. I like it. I'll give it an epic rating for limited, and I'll give it epic for constructed too, because it is a very destructive card. I mean, it blows up all the lands other than 6 and destroys all other permanents. So pretty solid. And if you're able to have enough mana left to go get a Planeswalker, you can put that in your hand and then cast it next turn. So pretty solid. I like it. Love the artwork for it too. So worthy of the epic rating. So I think that's it for the white cards. We've gone through all of them. Next up, we'll be doing blue. That'll be in the next video. But I hope you enjoyed going through all the white colored cards with me. It's pretty fun. Looks like white's got a lot of powerful tools, a lot of efficient creatures, and a lot of ways to make use of artifacts, creature tokens, and Power Stone tokens. So it'll be exciting to see how it plays out in limited and constructed. So we'll see. But that'll do it for this video. Like I said, the blue video will be coming up pretty soon here. Come back and join me again for that one. And until next time, we will see you then. Take care, everybody.